It is Seahawks Today, powered by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. So glad to have you with us. On today's show, we will look at potential options for replacements for Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll. If he were to step aside and retire, who could be the next head coach of your Seattle Seahawks? We will discuss and more coming up in just a few moments from right now. Before we do, a little quick survey before we go forward with the rest of this. Do you want Pete Carroll back as the Seahawks head coach next year? Are you all in on Coach Pete coming back and leading this young core beyond this season? If you are, type Y for yes. If not, type in for no. Let me know in the comment section below, and we'll get started with today's show. We told you last week about the rumors going around that John Schnider was ready to move on from Pete Carroll, that he has been from quite some time. And you may be wondering, well, what would happen if John Schnider and Pete Carroll were to break up of some sorts, and who could be the next head coach of the Seattle Seahawks if Pete were to step aside and retire? Well, I got 5 names that are the short list of, if I was John Schnider, who I would be calling right away. And, you know, I'll say this much. I like Pete Carroll. I hope Pete Carroll's back next year, but we have to be open and honest and have this discussion that if Pete Carroll is not going to be around, who could potentially take the reins? And so you may be asking, well, why would Pete Carroll leave? Well, the obvious answer is, number one, age, retirement. He is getting up there. He's in his 70s at this point in time, and you can't imagine him doing this a whole lot longer at this point. And as the years go by, and with where the Seahawks are at in this transition after this rebuild year of sorts, how much does Pete Carroll want to do this? Does he want to wait this out to see how far it can go, or is he ready to step aside? That's one question when it comes to his age. Also, we talked about the discontent with John Schnider, that they're not necessarily on the same page. The rumors that were out there that John Schnider might want a new head coach, and that there was frustration with Pete Carroll of the way in which he hasn't adapted necessarily to today's NFL when it comes to analytics and being aggressive on fourth down and those things, that there were concerns about that. And then there's still an opportunity that Pete Carroll could stay around but not necessarily be the head coach. Remember, part of his role with the Seahawks organization is that he's the executive vice president of football operations. And potentially you could have a scenario where maybe there's not the discontent necessarily, or maybe he's not ready to step away from football altogether but still wants to be involved in the organization. He could still be EVP but not necessarily be head coach. That's an opportunity as well, potentially, as Pete Carroll gets up there in years. So those are some possibilities of why Pete Carroll could step aside. So here's a true-false question that we want to put out there to you guys here on Seahawks Today. Pete Carroll will return next season as the Seahawks head coach. If you believe that's true, type T for true. If you don't think that's true, type F for false. Let me know in the comment section. T for true, F for false if you think Pete Carroll's going to be back next year. Now, I'll say this much. If this job does open, I think the Seahawks job is arguably the best job opening in the NFL if it were to come up for a lot of reasons. The obvious, Seattle, great place to live. But you're talking about a stable organization, one that has been there, done that has a system in place, that has been successful, that gives their coaches the opportunity to succeed, that has young talent. Whoever they hire, I think this is going to be a heavily sought-after job. And so with that, let's go ahead and look at some of these potential names. You start internally. I think there's only one name that you would consider as far as guys in-house, and that'd be Shane Waldron, the current offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. And Waldron has certainly been a guy that has been talked about as potentially taking on this role and succeeding Pete Carroll. And with his connections to Sean McVay, I think he's a name that will be looked at beyond even the Seahawks organization. As these jobs start to open in the next couple of weeks, I think Shane Waldron is going to interview for different head coaching positions around the National Football League. In Waldron's case, it's not a matter, I think, of if he'll be a head coach in the National Football League, but when. Will it be this go-round? Will it be in the future? He would be a name to look at, the only name I think that's going to get considered within the Seahawks organization. The big prize of them all is Sean Payton, the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Currently, he's an analyst for the NFL on Fox. And Sean Payton, of course, a Super Bowl champion, former coach of the year, had a great run turning around that New Orleans Saints franchise with Drew Brees. But we haven't seen much of Sean Payton without Drew Brees. And if you recall that one season that he was head coach and Drew Brees had retired, it did not necessarily go so great. What does Sean Payton look like without Drew Brees? I don't know, potentially. And then you factor in the possibility, if you do bring in Sean Payton, the Saints still own his rights. And so if you bring in Sean Payton, you have to give up some draft capital of some sorts. The Seahawks do have 9 picks in this upcoming draft, 4 picks within the first 2 rounds. Do you want to give up draft capital to bring in a head coach when you could use that on talent potentially? That's something to think about that you have to consider. Sean Payton is going to be, by far, I think, when you talk about coaching candidates, the most qualified, the best resume of sorts. But those factors involve something to think about. Not having Drew Brees there, and then the other factor of giving up draft capital, is that worth it? That's a decision that the Seahawks organization would ultimately have to make. So, your turn to be the GM. If Pete Carroll were to retire, would you want to trade for Sean Payton? If you would, type A for add. If you wouldn't want to add Sean Payton, type P for pass. Let me know in the comment section below if you would trade for Sean Payton to bring him into Seattle and be the next Seattle Seahawks head coach. Today's show is presented by BetUS, the exclusive sportsbook partner of Chat Sports. If you go to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code Seahawks125, you will get a 125% deposit bonus. Put $100 down, you get $125 to spend for free. It's like buying a pizza and then getting an extra pizza and then a couple slices on top of that for no charge. It's a great deal. You can bet on your Seattle Seahawks this weekend. You can bet on other games across the National Football League, bowl games, the NBA, and more. It's all in one place. Chatsports.com/bet. We go to the college ranks for the number 3 name on our list, and that is Lincoln Riley, the head coach of the USC Trojans. He's only been there a year, but he was very successful at the University of Oklahoma, leading one of the nation's most high-powered offenses over the years, both with the Sooners. And he has been able to develop plenty of NFL quarterbacks in his time in college football, from Baker Mayfield to Jalen Hurts to Kyler Murray. Now Caleb Williams looks like he's on track to be a top pick in the draft when he's eligible to come out. So he's got a good track record with the QBs. His system seems like something that would fit right in the National Football League with his style of offense. But you would have to pay him a significant amount of money, try to pry him away from college football. Remember, Pete Carroll came from USC as well, so this is something that the Seahawks have done before. Of realistic college options, because you're not going to get Nick Saban, obviously, to leave college football. Of realistic potential college options, Lincoln Riley is probably the best name when it comes to making a move to the National Football League potentially. He'll be somebody to keep an eye on when it comes to the college ranks. Back to coordinators in the NFL. DeMeco Ryans, who was a terrific player in the National Football League, spent many years with the Houston Texans, was a Pro Bowl caliber player. He has done a great job as the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. They have had the league's best defense this year, and he's interviewed for head coaching positions before. He turned down the opportunity to go further for the Vikings job last year and was loyal to that Niners organization, and we've seen that the Niners look pretty dang good, got a chance to realistically win that Super Bowl. As much as that may hate for Seahawk fans to hear, the Niners have been that good, and their core is the defense of what DeMeco Ryans has done. He is a player coach, and when you talk about the Seattle Seahawks and their history, of course, we always think about the Legion and the defense, the defensive strength of the Seahawks. The Seahawks have had their issues this year when it comes to that defensive side of the ball, DeMeco Ryans would immediately come in and try to fix this defense and get them back on track. He is going to be somebody that will be a head coach in the National Football League at some point. I would expect that he's going to be up for a number of jobs this go-round. So, who will be the Seahawks head coach next season? Will Pete Carroll be back? Will it be somebody else? Tell me in the comment section. Give me one name. Who will be Seattle's next head coach in 2023? Whether it is Pete Carroll or somebody else, whether it's somebody we've talked about or haven't talked about, let me know in the comment section below. The final name on the short list for the Seahawks of potential head coach options is Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Was a terrific college player at the University of Miami. And now you look at this Bills offense with Josh Allen and company. Ken Dorsey is doing an incredible job. Brian Daboll, the head coach of the Giants, got a lot of credit for what he did with the success of the Bills offense over the years. But Ken Dorsey has come in, and that offense hasn't missed a beat. In fact, they might even be better than what they were under Brian Daboll. Ken Dorsey is going to be a head coach at some point. He is a terrific offensive mind. I would love the idea, quite frankly. If you're looking for a young offensive-minded coach that's already in the National Football League, a young hotshot coordinator, Ken Dorsey could potentially be your guy. So to recap, if Pete Carroll were to step aside and retire, our 5 names to consider right off the jump: Shane Waldron, in-house, the current OC for Seattle; Sean Payton, former head coach of the New Orleans Saints; Lincoln Riley, the head coach at USC; DeMeco Ryans, the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers; and then Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. We cover the Seahawks each and every day here on the channel with nonstop Seattle Seahawks coverage. We cover this team like no one else does. Subscribe now for daily news and rumors segments, watch parties, live shows, and more. It's all in one place, right here on Seahawks Today by Chat Sports. Subscribe now, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.